So in 2 minutes, we are going to start. I kindly ask to all the panelists to turn on their camera. Thank you. You will be able to see the session going live on your screen.
È già qua.
Good morning. Please.
Greetings from Washington. I'm honored to participate in the 2021. My only regret is I can't join you in person, but I really appreciate the opportunity to say.
Good morning, everyone. Please take your seats. We have the privilege to introduce you this great panel about the balance of power in the Middle East and North Africa region and the future of American engagement. We will have with us this morning an opening remarks by Lorenzo Guerini, the Minister of Defense of the Republic of Italy. And then will join us in the discussion James Cleverly, Ministers of State on Middle East and North Africa in UK, Andreas Wordbrand, EU Ambassador in Afghanistan, Stefano Del Col, Head of Mission and Force Commander, United Nations Interim Force in Lebanon, Zai Jun, Special Envoy, Chinese Government and Middle East China, Ibrahim Kalin, welcome, Senior Advisor, President of Turkey, John Hallen, President of Brookings Institution, and Andrei Kortunov, Director General, RICA, Russia, and I will be joined, thank you, Lina Khatib for being with us, Director of the precious Middle East and North America program, Chatham House. It's a crucial topic we're going to discuss with this egregious guest, and I have the privilege to give at the beginning the floor for the opening remarks to Lorenzo Guerini, Minister of Defense. Please, Lorenzo Guerini, the floor is yours.
Grazie, Direttore. Spero che mi sentiate.
Thank you, Director. I hope you can hear me. I would like to thank ISPI and the Ministry for Foreign Affairs for the invitation to this event. This gives me the chance to share with the experts present in this audience and with the panelists of high level that we have here with us. I have the chance to contribute some considerations about the broader area of the Mediterranean Sea, which is at the very core of these discussions. And I have the chance to show the approach of the Italian defense in this complex framework. The Mediterranean area is a geographical central context important for protecting the security and the strategic interests of my country, which actually plays a central role for the Atlantic region, which, in other words, confirms the strategic importance as link between the north and the south of the globe and its relevance in terms of strategic approaches between the East and the West. The geographical scope we are referring to is now living a crisis which actually affects and challenges our security that come from complex dynamics, including military intervention and systemic interventions, which need prompt actions and the use of all the political, economical, military, social, and cultural tools that we have. In the south of Europe, we play an important role, and we need to be aware of the impacts on security that this role implies. We are going to see the next balance of the global situations living in this area. We are living at a period in which the technological advance and the innovation poses us many choices connected to the approach that we intend to have in the future. At the very beginning of these remarks, I would like to talk about the concept of broader Mediterranean area, which is a geopolitical area consisting of different dimensions, cultures, and societies that are more and more interconnected at an economical and security level. These factors are characterized by elements and topics that strongly affect our region. We are talking about an area that consists of adjacent areas to the Mediterranean Sea. It incorporates the Middle East, the Gulf, the Sahel, and the African Horn, moving up to the Guinea Gulf. We have strategic areas that are at the center of the activity of the military Italian forces and their operations in the international and national protection field. These areas matches with the topic of this panel that actually affects the security of whole Europe. The threats that we have from the southern border, such as illegal trafficking of human trafficking and also terrorism, and the recent threats, which are hybrid in nature, not only involve Italy, but the whole European country and the security of the Mediterranean area. What happens today is an example of this. These are considerations, for example, on the African Horn, challenged by ethnic and religious fights, and also the terrorists working in Al-Shabaab in Africa, which are one of the criticalities of this region. And for this reason, the defense of the Italian government is focused on the Mare Nostrum area. We have been chairing the Horn of the African Horn since 10 years, and we work to ensure the sea trades coming from Suez Channel in order to ensure the global and economic balance. For this reason, we have created a highly strategic plan, and we are working in the anti-piracy program. We are the most important contributor of the Somalian and Mogat and African forces to counteract the piracy as well, and we will be part of the new mission in Mozambique. We are also increasing over the last year our presence in Sahel by acting in synergy with the countries across the region and the partners and stakeholders that still operate in that field, such as the task force operating in the area in Cuba. We are also working on the opening of a new international hub in the capital city of the country, which will be functional for our multilateral mission in Niger and our presence in the region in general. Strictly interconnected to this effort is our contribution to the security of the Eritrean Gulf in partnership with the African and European countries working in the area. In a nutshell, we are working for the defense of the African country, which actually consists of a triangle with the apexes that are far but close at the same time. The African Horn, the Mediterranean borders, and the Guinea Gulf. We are also working with other partnerships in the country to distribute our diplomacy all over the regions down there. We want and we wish to create the economic and social conditions required to pave the way towards development, growth, which are also essential for our security. The concept of wage in terms of specific aspects, as Borrell has also stated, are interest of all the European countries. I think that we should make more efforts on behalf of the European Union in the sub-Saharan area by strengthening the actions in place both in the African Horn and in the Sahel region. The synergy of the European countries in that area not only include the military efforts, but also the other aspects that are needed to enforce and strengthen the institutional bodies and entities operating in these territories. The capacity building action of the military force is functional to ensure protection and security, and to create institution building actions and strengthen the policies in the long term. Our action actually promotes also actions in partnership with the NATO. And our role in this context is to play the defense and ensure the defense of the Euro and Atlantic Alliance. We are working towards a strategic direction that actually challenges us a lot. We are working in Iraq next to the security institutions of the country in order to tackle Daesh. The history teaches us that the stability of the Middle East is fundamental for the stability of the Mediterranean area. So our efforts in Iraq, starting from the energy supply, needs to be strengthened. The Italian forces want to work in agreement with the Iraqi forces in order to strengthen the training, the NATO training in the country that we will chair in May 2022. Going back to North Africa, we can and we need to focus on Libya, which is a country having a strategic importance in which we are called to tackle any contrasts and challenges that we might face, also for our security. Here's the commitment of the Italian government, and the Italian defense in Libya is restated, and the next elections might lead to a more stable situation. As far as Libya is concerned as well, our mission will be permanently present on the territory, committing in ensuring their operational capacity and cooperation in terms of specific fields, such as health and the protection of the Libyan institutions in order to allow them stabilizing the country. Another country in which we are operating right now is Lebanon. For the crucial situation it is living in terms of economic and social crisis. We want to keep supporting this country, both through UNIFIL and through a bilateral assistance action. This is almost the end of my remarks, and I want to add some considerations that I hope will make this discussion more fruitful. Two are the main elements that I want to underline. First of all, the need for the US administration to be involved in the Indo-Pacific respect and region, in which we as Europe need to commit more and make efforts in terms of political, social, and use of equipment that we have available. We also need to take into account all the challenges that come from this region: terrorism, climate change. And here, the European Union, I think that it should put in place its abilities and skills in terms of ensuring security and stability for the long term. As far as we are concerned, and in terms of strategic approaches adopted by Italy, we started an update to strengthen our defense strategy in the Mediterranean by evaluating risk assessment procedures and understanding which are the main risks we have to face. Our qualified participation to the main international missions, the surveillance activities, and the permanent missions all around the countries in the world. This objective consists of two main aspects. On the one hand, we have cooperative security and crisis management by using our military diplomacy and fostering a dialogue with the stakeholders. To this, we add our competence in training, advising, and providing help to local military forces, as our sector can be able to satisfy the needs of our partners in terms of needs and equipments. The second dimension concerns the operational dimension that actually includes sea protection and safety, involving analysis and promptly intervention and action in case of risk or threats. This aspect also includes a relationship with all the international stakeholders in which we commit, and that underlines the strategic relevance of the Mediterranean area, both for the Alliance and for the European Union. Thank you for your attention.
Please, Lina.
Okay. I've been told that we next will go straight to a video statement by Derek Chollet, Counselor of the US Department of State.
Greetings from Washington. I'm honored to participate in the 2021 Med Dialogues. My only regret is I can't join you in person, but I really appreciate the opportunity to say a few words. President Biden's commitment to the Middle East is unshakable. As the Secretary of Defense said just a few weeks ago at the MENA Dialogue, the United States isn't going anywhere. The region is too important and too tied to US interests. And while significant challenges remain, such as the threat from Iran's nuclear ambitions and terrorist networks, there are also incredible opportunities for building new bonds and strengthening economic and people-to-people ties. Our aim is to de-escalate regional tensions and create space for people throughout the region to realize their aspirations. The United States has vital security interests in the Middle East and has maintained a regular military presence there for over 70 years. That fundamental reality will not change. We are committed to our security partnerships and building partner capacity. These are critical elements of a unified approach to combat Iran and its malign influence across the region, including the threat it poses to Israel. Our commitment to Israel's security remains ironclad. We are working closely with our partners to ensure Iran will never possess a nuclear weapon and are focused on longer-term arrangements that address Iran's many other challenges to regional security. Moreover, as part of the Defeat ISIS mission, we will continue to train, advise, and enable Iraqi forces and Syrian democratic forces in northeast Syria. As we confront challenges, we must also seize opportunities. The Biden administration fully embraces the Abraham Accords. These and other normalization agreements are forging new political and economic ties across the region. Just to cite one example, look to the numerous joint ventures and $600 million in trade that the UAE and Israel have launched this year alone. We are also working to spur economic investment across the Middle East and Africa through the President's Build Back Better World Initiative on infrastructure. So when it comes to the future of American engagement, our goals are clear. We must both seize opportunities and confront threats together, and in a way that protects and promotes fundamental freedoms. This is our best path to a thriving Middle East and to meeting our shared objectives. Thanks for convening this important dialogue today. I really appreciate the opportunity to be with you briefly.
Well, I have to say, with 10 men on this panel, it's the closest I get to coaching a football team. It's a very interesting landmark for me personally, I have to say. Well, to talk serious business, it's my pleasure to be addressing the first interaction of today with Mr. James Cleverly, who is Minister of State for the Middle East and North Africa in the UK. Mr. Cleverly, thank you so much for joining us virtually. I know you were meant to be here in person, but couldn't because of, unfortunately, COVID. So I hope you are feeling okay. The first question I'm going to ask, and please everyone on the panel, because we have limited time, let's try to make everything quite brief and to the point. Obviously, we are now post-Brexit period in the UK at a time when the US is taking a bit of a strategic reorientation regarding the region. So what are the prospects of cooperation in the Middle East for the UK, and has the UK modified or is planning to modify its approach towards the Middle East one way or another?
Well, thank you. And it is a huge disappointment that I'm stuck here in rather cold and wet and damp Britain rather than joining you in Rome. But nevertheless, very, very pleased to join you virtually. And I can assure you that the UK remains absolutely committed to working with partners all over the globe. And one of the things that we set out in our integrated review with regard to the Middle East, North Africa, is our commitment to work with partners. And that very much includes the United States of America, who are a close and long-standing partner, both in the region and more broadly, but also to continue working with our European partners. I was recently at a number of meetings about Libya, for example, which have been hosted in Paris, in Berlin. Very active engagement, obviously, with Italy. So we remain close partners with our European friends and neighbours on those issues, which are of both interest and concern to all of us. But of course, we also make the point from the integrated review that we aspire to continue in our role as a genuinely global partner, which means that in the Indo-Pacific, we will continue partnering with old and new friends there. And of course, in the region, we are still a very active participant in the global coalition against Daesh. We're working with our European and American and global partners in the current negotiations with Iran about their nuclear activities through the JCPOA. So the UK is and will absolutely continue to be a strong and close partner to countries in the region in terms of protecting their security and stability, in terms of reducing and eliminating conflict, and also in terms of helping them to withstand the shocks, whether they be economic shocks, health shocks like COVID, or conflict. So we are still a global player. We're absolutely committed to remain that way.
Speaker that we have now is Ambassador Andreas Formbrandt, EU representative to Afghanistan, based in Doha, I suppose. He should be with us. Ambassador from Brandt, are you listening to us?
Yes, I'm here.
Great, Ambassador. So welcome to our panel, and we will appreciate if you could tell us about the lessons that the European Union learned from the long-term presence and mission of many of your countries inside NATO in Afghanistan, and in more general term, what is the role that the European Union can play to help the stabilization of Afghanistan in the years to come? Please.
Thank you very much. And I agree with my previous speaker that I would have preferred being in Rome. However, I'm happy to be invited to see you all. I'm also happy to see my former boss, Mircea Joana, on the podium. And on your question, I mean, I was a bit intrigued by the MENA dimension and why invite the Afghanistan ambassador to the MENA region. But of course, there are several links. And one of the link, you mentioned my location. I'm currently in Brussels, but we are increasingly in Doha, and Doha plays a very important role as a hub for the continuation of the evacuation, which we call a safe passage. Doha, Qatar has been very instrumental in helping, I think, all of us in bringing those Afghans at risk or Afghans who want to leave the country out of the country, and assist us also in the first dialogues that we have had with the Taliban and the humanitarian dimension. So on your question, the EU has been, I would say, on the very principled spectrum of players before August 15th, before the fall of Kabul. We have been very vocal on human rights, particularly the rights of women, democracy, pluralism, and we continue to do so, to advocate for those. However, we have taken a very pragmatic approach post August 15, namely the High Representative Borrell has decided to offer a return of what we call, agreed by Council conclusions, a minimal presence in Afghanistan. And we are working on that very hard. I have at the moment 2 colleagues already back in Afghanistan, and I would say we are the first Western player who is basically back in Afghanistan. For the main reasons of providing humanitarian assistance, which our humanitarian branch ECHO has been doing throughout the last 20 years. And by the way, also in Taliban-controlled areas, so that is nothing new in that sense, but also to help the safe passage operations and to do all sorts of operational work. We have, for the moment, not entered the development field. And we are very careful to remain under the threshold of a recognition. I think we are all in the same boat in that. We don't want to recognize the Taliban as a legitimate government, because they are not. But we're trying to do everything under the threshold to alleviate the plight. I mean, to improve the situation of Afghans, because as you may know, we have seen the worst decline or the worst increase of hunger ever recorded by the UN in a matter of 6 months. And that has to do with climate change, with drought conditions, but it has also to do with a complete standstill of the economy, also impacted upon by the sanctions, and not only by the direct effect of the sanctions, but also indirect effects, meaning that banks can no longer carry out the normal money transmission, even for remittances, for donor money, for humanitarian money. So even if we don't do classical development, because that is mainly done with a government, and we are refraining from that, But even the other channeling of money is highly complicated, and we're hoping that our presence can contribute to improving the situation, improving the humanitarian situation. If you allow me one last comment also on the Middle Eastern dimension, apart from what I already mentioned on Qatar, I think we are increasingly calling upon what we called, or what the international community calls, the non-traditional donors, because this is no longer a NATO or a European project, but I think it's also a task for other countries, not only in the Middle East, but also in the Middle East, to contribute to, because the migration and the security aspects, the international terrorism, and also the booster that international terrorism may get by the ascent to power of the Taliban is something that should worry and should concern all of us. And my basic final remark is, I think we're all together in this. Afghanistan has for a long time not been a very, it's been a very complicated and a very difficult subject, but it has not been controversial in that sense. We have often seen, and we see it still today, that there is consensus on the major ingredients of the way ahead, namely non-recognition, but a lot of engagement to avoid the worst in terms of humanitarian situation, but also to increase to a regional stability. And that region, I would say, goes way beyond the immediate neighbors. It goes, I would say, from China to the Middle East. So with that, back to you.
Thank you. The next question I have is to Stefano Del Col. From May next year, Italy is going to take the lead of the NATO mission in Iraq. You yourself, of course, had the mission of UNIFIL in Lebanon. So what are the lessons already learned from the UNIFIL mission? And what are the prospects and challenges for multilateral missions, particularly with Italian leadership?
I mean, thank you very much. I took over the responsibility of the mission in 2018, and the middle of 2018, I will leave soon, at the end of January next year, after 3 years and 7 months. So let me share with you a few lessons that I learned, identified that I learned in the past 3 years, because the Lebanon that I visited for the first time in 2007 is not the Lebanese that is now. Unfortunate, I have to say. I mean, the first observation is the dynamics in one part of the Middle East often have a ripple effect across the region, and any incidents, even when confined geographically, especially in southern Lebanon, has the potential to spiralize of control with unpredictable consequence, which go far behind what was intended. In May this year, the escalation of hostilities between Israel and Hamas in Gaza, and during the Palestinian Abka Day, had a reflection also along the blue line. We suffer incidents in an area that is in the eastern part of our air operation. One Lebanese was killed. We suffered a few launch of rockets from south to north and return fire from Israel. So violent demonstration along the blue line from Palestinian, from the Palestinian refugees camp in Lebanon. They went around the blue line and they demonstrate against Israel. So although eventually contained as a tension stretched into the summer, in summer we had another two incidents on the 4th and the 6th of August, where I spent hours on the phone to restore the cessation of hostilities triggered by yet more rocket fire fired by Hezbollah and the Israeli airstrike in Syria. The second observation is how to do with the type of actors and the nature of conflict in the region. This is another important issue because including, we have to include the conflict that UNIFIL deals with. The parties engage in the conduct of asymmetrical and irregular warfare across different battlefields. And every incident on the ground, on the sea, may have a bearing of fragile situation along the blue line. The Israeli Defense Forces and Hezbollah have been long engaged in a form of mutual deterrence, which involve a constant testing of each other's resolve. I see similar configuration of conflict across the region, which parties engage in a perpetual zero-sum logic at any cost with a limited appetite for compromise or a political process. The third observation is that the impact of what is local does not stay within borders. So localized popular uprising have soared into civilian unrest, in some cases all-out wars, which then move into complex traits of confrontation, drawing in regional powers, all competent to shape the conflict by supporting their respective proxies. The effects of conflict in Syria, Iraq, Yemen, in the form of refugees, destroy economies, and the threat of cross-border terrorism have had a worldwide implication. So their dynamics have strengthened outlines, led by violent extremists, and deepening division and fuel political instability in the Middle East. Great efforts were made to shield Lebanon from the Syria conflict by the role of Hezbollah in its regional activity, the massive influx of refugees, Islamic threats on the borders, the interconnectedness of the banking system between Lebanon and Syria, the disruption of the trade routes through Syria and to the rest of the region, and the impact of a sanction and the sanction boosting have all negative affect Lebanon and the sweeping crisis it is today. I certainly hope that diplomacy gains more ground. This is my wish. The region will become more stable, and such positive timing bringing a better outlook for Lebanon and its economic and political stability. Thank you.
The next speaker is Zhai Jun, Special Envoy of the Chinese government on the Middle East and China. Mr. Jun, welcome. Have your opinion on Beijing's strategy in the broader Mediterranean region as a central economic partner for many countries of this area after Washington disengagement from Afghanistan and the redefinition of its role in the Middle East. Please, Mr. Jun, you have the floor.
Thank you. It gives me great pleasure to attend the Mediterranean Dialogues 2021. The MENA region is a vital part of the Mediterranean culture and the leading contributor to human civilization. This region is geopolitically important and enjoys resource endowment. Security and stability in this region bears on peace and development of the world. Currently, the pandemic is compounding changes unseen in a century. and the MENA region is facing multiple challenges. The internal growth drivers are weak, hotspot issues keep flaring up and are difficult to solve, and uncertainties and destabilizing factors are rising. International community should do more to support regional countries in fighting COVID-19, respect the development path chosen independently by them, find solutions to hotspot issues that suit the realities of the region, and accommodate the interests of all parties, work together to combat terrorism and contribute to safeguarding peace and development in the region. As a permanent member of the UN Security Council and a responsible major country, China always bears in mind the interests of the countries and people in the MENA region and is committed to safeguarding regional peace and tranquility. First, China contributes wisdom to promoting enduring peace and security in the MENA region. State Councilor and Foreign Minister Wang Yi visited the region 3 times this year, and on China's behalf, he proposed many important initiatives, such as the 5-point initiative on achieving security and stability in the Middle East. In essence, this initiative is calling on regional countries to shake off external disturbances, enhance independence and self-reliance, stay committed to exploring development paths suited to their reality, and build a security architecture that accommodates the reasonable concerns of all parties. Second, China firmly supports the just cause of the Palestinian people. China always cares much about the just cause of the Palestinian people. When the intense conflicts broke out this May, China actively engaged in efforts to promote peace and the cessation of violence. China provided emergency assistance in cash, medical supplies, and vaccines to the Palestinian people on many occasions, put forward the 3 proposals for the implementation of the 2-state solution, hosted the Palestine-Israel Peace Symposium, and proposed the convening of a more authoritative and broadly representative international conference to realize peace. Third, China plays a constructive role in the political settlement of hotspot issues. China works actively to advance the negotiations on compliance with the JCPOA and safeguard this important outcome of multilateralism. China put forward 4 proposals on the political settlement of the Syrian issue and firmly supports the Syrian-led, Syrian-owned political settlement process. China holds objective and impartial views and plays a constructive role on issues like Yemen and Libya. Fourth, China works to deepen mutually beneficial cooperation for win-win development.
Next, we turn to Dr. Ibrahim Kalin. This is a very interesting moment for Turkey in the region.
The Chinese side hasn't finished our speech. May we continue, please?
Perhaps a warming of relations between Turkey and some Gulf countries. Where is Turkey in terms of the adaptation of its foreign policy in light of these changes?
Thank you. And as the coach of our team, as she pointed out, I have to take this seriously and see if I can place Turkey somewhere in this match. But before that, let me just say a few words about some of the terminology that we use, which is expected to help us understand issues more clearly, but they actually end up covering up most of the issues on the ground. The term MENA, for example, Middle East and North Africa, has always seemed to be very problematic to me because it tends to be stereotyping. Middle East and North Africa is a vast region. There are many different communities there. You have Muslims, Christians, Jews living together. First of all, in that vast region, you have Turks, Arabs, Persians, Kurds, and many, many other Africans and others in North Africa. It's actually much more plural, multicultural than it is credited for. Then you look at countries like Egypt, Lebanon, Jordan, and Turkey, and other places where Muslims and non-Muslims actually live in peace. Much better circumstances, I have to say, than many other parts of the world. The reason I mentioned is that we tend to stereotype these regions and look at the issues through the lens of some of these key issues, which are unfortunately brought out in this manner. For example, on most of the difficult, urgent political issues from Libya to Syria, most of the countries and analysts look at these issues through the lens of three, in some cases, two main issues. Number one is anti-terrorism, number two is migration, and in some cases, like in Libya, it is oil and gas. It's only through the lens of these three issues that you see governments, analysts, commentators, and others look at Libya, look at Syria, look at Lebanon or Israeli conflict and other issues. Of course, these are serious issues. We have to take them seriously, no doubt. But if you reduce the entire region, the whole country, a whole region, history, culture, memory, peoples, and all of that, I think we end up actually making a lot of conceptual mistakes, which lead to mistakes in politics. Such terms as democracy, stability, human rights, development, cooperation, these are extremely important issues. But I have to say that Muslim countries, first of all, have to overcome this psychology of victimhood. Blaming the West for every problem, every evil at home must stop so that we take ownership of our own problems. But at the same time, Western nations should stop lecturing the rest of the world, the non-Western world, about these terms: the development, economy, cooperation, migration, terrorism, democracy, and so on and so forth. As Theodor Adorno said many years ago, if the word progress was to make any sense today, it will make sense only when people stop going home hungry, when genocides stop happening, when there is genuine equality, when Muslims are not harassed or discriminated against, when Muslims are not dehumanized or demonized in public as if it is something that has become part and parcel of the regular political discourse. Orientalism, Eurocentrism, all these related issues must be addressed. But of course, the remedy to Orientalism and Eurocentric understanding of history is not Occidentalism. It's not Orientalism in reverse, Muslims doing the same thing that Orientalists and Eurocentrists have done for the last century or so towards the West. So with this few points, let me also underline the significance of one point that was mentioned a couple of times, the defeat of Daesh. I think that that's a global victory for all. We should all celebrate this. We should all support it. And I think most of the countries here are part of the international coalition against Daesh, and that's something to be welcomed, no doubt. And we have to continue this fight against Daesh. And Muslims themselves have to take, again, leadership in condemning, stopping this disease of extremism, violent extremism, terrorism, Daesh, Al-Qaeda, and other related terrorist movements. There is no doubt about that. But at the same time, if Western nations do not fight Islamophobia, dehumanization of Muslims with same equal force and consistency, then we will end up with a vicious circle again. Islamophobes feeding off terrorist, violent extremists like Daesh, Al-Qaeda people, and vice versa. And we will be spending a good part of our lives in this vicious cycle. The same goes true for the issue of migration. We've been dealing with this issue for many years. There are more than 60 million refugees around the world today, and it's not a one-way street movement. Sometimes people tend to think that it's always from the east to the west, from south to north. It's not. It's actually all over the place. It can, if you look at the map of migrants around the world, it happens in all directions. But Syrian refugee crisis has become the main issue in the last 5-6 years, especially. But look at how the international community has coped with this issue. Has largely failed in dealing with the Syrian refugees. On top of that, now you have refugee issues from Iraq, from Afghanistan, from Libya, Ethiopia, and many other parts of the world. And progress, again, will make sense. Justice will make sense when, in fact, refugees stop dying on the open seas or off the coast of wealthy and rich nations of the world. You have to take more responsibility. We all have to take more responsibility. I don't want to talk about what Turkey has done with the refugees. I think it's common knowledge. But if we don't address this issue at its root, in Syria, in Afghanistan, in Libya, and in Africa, in other places, we will, again, spending a good part of our lives talking about refugees, illegal migrants, human trafficking, and the rest of the issues that come up on our agenda all the time. And we, again, it will end up actually reducing migrants to numbers and charts and statistics. We forget that they are human beings with real stories, with real life stories, with memories, with families. But unfortunately, that is not the perception, and that is not the reality as far as the refugee crisis is concerned. We signed a deal with the European Union 6 years ago. It was the March 18 EU-Turkey migration statement to deal with the refugee crisis coming from Syria. And if you look at how much or how little the EU has done in regards to that issue, it gives you an idea about where the world is standing on the refugee crisis today. And I don't really see any kind of in-depth long-term thinking about how to deal with the refugee issue, because most of the attitude of most of the Western countries is that refugee issue is not an issue for us as long as they don't come our way. If they stay wherever they are, if they go somewhere else, then the issue is considered to be resolved. But we know that that's not the way to resolve this issue. The international community, again, has mostly lost interest in the Syrian file. I mean, we have Mr. Stefan de Mistura, who spent so much precious time trying to address some aspects of this problem. And he knows, and all those who follow the Syrian file alone know how difficult this issue is. But right now, the world has turned its attention to somewhere else, understandably, because the conflict has gone on for more than 10 years now. But the problem is still there. It's not really going anywhere. The refugee issue is not going to be resolved magically. It's still there, because as long as the Syrian conflict continues the way it is right now, it will continue to produce the migration issue, the terrorism issue will remain on our agenda, and so on and so forth. So you have to look at it from a kind of a larger strategic point of view. And there, a question that is related to the title of our panel, brings to my mind the question of whether the reluctant superpower of the world, that is the United States, is really willing to get engaged in any of these issues. I mean, you seem to imply that the U.S. involvement in the MENA region is important, and I felt like, that's kind of more an expectation than a statement of a fact. But we just heard from the U.S. representative that actually what the Biden administration is proposing to do in the Middle East and other places, especially in Israel, in the Palestinian conflict, is not any different from what the Trump administration has put together. And when they say they are fully committed to Abraham Accord, my sense is that, okay, nothing is going to change. The occupation will continue, the suffering of the Palestinian people will continue, but the Palestinians will be blamed for obstructing democracy, for obstructing the peace process, for obstructing this and that. And I think we have to stop this, really. When was the last time you heard anything about Quartet doing something about the Palestinians? It has practically evaporated. Nothing is really happening there. But I still hold the hope that after the Netanyahu era, now maybe there is a compromise government in Israel, and compromise is a good thing, and they will maybe compromise on some other issues, including the rights of the Palestinians. But that requires international engagement and cooperation. We cannot expect that issue to solve itself without international engagement and some pressure, of course, on the right issue. So let me just stop here. A few more remarks about Libya, about a few other issues on the Mediterranean. But again, I don't want to get our coach angry, so I will just stop here for the time being.
Your coach has noticed, you have not spoken really about Turkey's position regarding the issues that you mentioned.
Okay.
So I would like to, if you allow me, although we don't have much time, to ask you if you could please tell us, where does Turkey stand? I mean, I agree with your analysis as myself, an outside analyst, and you also are a brilliant analyst and academic yourself, but putting your special advisor to the president hat, it would be really wonderful if you can illuminate us, where does Turkey stand on these issues?
Sure. The Syrian conflict, we are part of both the Geneva process and the Astana processes, but unfortunately the Geneva process under the UN, again, has almost evaporated. has become very dysfunctional, mostly thanks to the stubborn position of the Assad regime and its backers, mainly Russia and Iran. But we are trying to engage both Russia and Iran to put pressure on the Syrian regime to move forward with the constitutional committee, with the Astana process, and all hopefully to be brought under the Geneva process. We are helping the situation on the ground more than any other country. As you know, we host about 4 million refugees, Syrian refugees in Turkey for the last 5-6 years, with very little international help. And our president has said, look, we don't care whether others come to help or not. We will continue to help these people because they're not coming to Turkey for picnic. They're running away from a brutal war, from the chemical weapons and the barrel bombs of the Assad regime. We will continue to support the Syrian people, but we also have reached a point in our capacity to take any more Syrian refugees. That fact needs to be acknowledged, I think, by others and the international community, EU, United States, UN, and other international bodies have to take, again, ownership and leadership to deal with this. And this is only one aspect of the issue, that's the refugees. I referred to the March 18th statement. We were expecting, and I spent so much time on this, talking to my EU colleagues over the last 2 years, to have an update on the migration deal so that it will be more effective. It will really mean something on the ground for the Syrian people. The money that was allocated by the EU, 3+3 billion euros. Again, if you consider the enormous size of this problem, 6 billion euro is nothing. It's practically nothing for millions of refugees, for their needs, educational needs, medical needs, and everything else. And that money still, okay, we said yes to it 5 years or 6 years ago. Only half of it has been spent on the Syrian refugees because of EU bureaucracy. Every time we raise this issue, they say, well, what can we do? This is EU bureaucracy. Syrian people, refugees, don't wait for the EU bureaucracy to speed up. I mean, their needs are urgent, daily, every single day. Regardless of that, we were hoping that the migration deal will have been updated by now. Again, it got stuck in the EU discussions about this issue, that member blocking it, this member, saying no. We end up again spending another 2 years just discussing the idea of updating the migration deal with Turkey. By the way, those who know that money does not come into our coffers. It goes straight to the Syrian refugees. Even that cannot be done. That cannot be done efficiently or even humanely. And then we talk about the international community dealing with the refugee issue. In Idlib, Turkey is the only country that is holding Idlib safe and together at the moment. You have more than 2.5 million people squeezed in the Idlib part of Syria, that is the northwest part of Syria. And had it not been for our military presence there, right now the Assad regime, with the support of the Russians and the Iranians, will have run over that place, probably killed thousands of people, force them to move up. The only place they can go is Turkey. That will have put more pressure on us as far as refugees are concerned. That will have put more pressure, more people on the run towards Turkey, towards Greece, towards Bulgaria, that is towards Europe. Turkey is the only country that is doing this of containment and stopping the regime and its attacks in the Idlib area by itself. The United States support for PYD-YPG has been an ill-conceived policy from the very beginning. We've said this 1,000 times, and I say it again. We just heard from our US colleague that they will continue to support PYD-YPG, when in fact, Trump, as the US president, declared almost 2 years ago that Daesh has been defeated. The caliphate has been defeated, and the US and the international community has won the battle against Daesh, but they're still giving all this money and weaponry, political support and everything else to PYD-YPG. And our objection has been twofold to that policy. First of all, yes, we have to fight against Daesh. We have to defeat Daesh. In fact, we did. We eliminated more than 4,000 Daesh terrorists along our border in our incursions, in our fights against Daesh as Turkey. We have extradited, I don't know how many people, 18, 19,000. We put many of them in prison. So we gave them a real fight against Daesh in Turkey and along the Syrian-Turkish border, which is more than 1,100 kilometers long. But in terms of who you work with to do this, the consequences have been disastrous for the Syrian people. Obama administration decided to pick up one particular group among all the groups in Syria. PYD, YPG, everybody knows, all US officials know, and everybody I think in this room knows that PYD, YPG is PKK in Syria. And PKK is listed as a terrorist organization on EU's list of terrorist organizations, US list of terrorist organizations, and elsewhere. They know this very well. They support PKK in Syria. And then the question is, how can you fight a terrorist organization with another by supporting by another terrorist organization? They say, well, they have been the most effective force against Daesh. That is true, with only the provision that we have to remember that that's thanks to your support. If you had supported, put all this military and financial support behind any other group in Syria, you have non-PKK Kurds, you have Arabs, you have Sunnis, you have non-Sunnis in Syria, you have many others who want to see a democratic, pluralistic Syria. You have not supported these people. You have picked up one particular group among even the Kurds. The non-PKK Kurds have not received this kind of support from the US for the last 7-8 years in the fight against Daesh. Remember when Kobani was on the news, that Kobani was about to fall, was surrounded by Daesh terrorists. We proposed to the Obama administration that we would like to help, that is send in our own troops, but also we want to bring the Barzani Peshmerga from Iraq to help this fight. The response from PYD was that we don't want to see Turkey, we don't want to see Barzani Peshmerga, that is Iraqi Peshmerga, KDP, here in Syria. We can take care of it on our own. They couldn't do it on our own, everybody knows that. It was, again, thanks to the US support for it. So even the non-PKK Kurds in Syria have been left out in the cold. And if you look at who is supporting the Syrian opposition right now, the remaining fledgling, weakened Syrian opposition, who is supporting them? When was the last time you heard or saw a prominent Western head of state receiving the head of the Syrian opposition, legitimate Syrian opposition that is going to these meetings in Astana, in Geneva, other places to represent the Syrian people? Now you see a change of climate. Now some Arab countries are saying, oh, maybe we should accept the Assad regime, start normalizing relations with them as if nothing happened. So, I mean, if you look at it from this point of view, we've said this was an ill-conceived policy from the very beginning. We could have fought against Daesh with many other Syrians, with Turkish troops on the ground as well. But my point is that we fully support Syria's territorial integrity and political unity. But if you support one separatist group in Syria, that is the PKK, PYD, and it's clear that their agenda is to create either some kind of a Kurdish state out of northern Syria or create some kind of an autonomy. Their primary goal is not to fight Daesh. It's just a tool for them, to reach their ultimate goal. So we are still working, of course, with our partners, NATO, US, EU, Russia, Iran, and others to stop the fighting and bring a degree of stability and to try to move the political process forward in Syria. On the Palestinian issue, I think our position has been very clear.
May I just interrupt just because we don't have that much time and we still have 2 speakers.
Sure.
So I know we could speak forever. I suggest we move on to General Allen.
We have is John Allen, president of the Brookings Institution, former general and one of the most respected experts on security and foreign affairs in the US. President Allen, what is the state of the heart of the America's back policy in the Middle East and North Africa region? And what is the future, what may be the future of a US role as security provider in this with its regional international partners, considering after the withdrawal from Afghanistan, especially in the wake of a growing presence in this region of Russia and China? Please, President.
Well, thank you very much. It's wonderful to be in my 3rd MENA panel in the 48 hours I've been here. And Dina, to your point, being the only woman on this panel, this room is full of folks who have been in the other discussions we have been in, any one of which is far more qualified than I am to sit in this chair, and most of them are women. So we are in the presence of many women who are masters of the subjects of this area, and I'm honored and humbled to be in your presence. And I will, with all due respect to my Turkish counterpart here, I was President Obama's special envoy at the beginning of that war, and I spent 10 separate trips in Ankara where we had very clear agreement with the Turkish government on how we would align in Syria when the time came. We also spent time in Erbil, time in Ankara, arranging, and in particular Kobani. I personally arranged the relief of Kobani. And if it hadn't been for Turkey and America and the KRG agreeing on how we would relieve Kobani, and it created a relationship which created momentum in Syria, which ultimately created a stability and a peace in Syria that was supported by the international community, it could not have happened. So while I understand your concerns about the YPG, the PRK, I understand those concerns, but that's not how it started. It started with all of us together agreeing that we had to take those steps necessary to deal with the issue of the entire Syrian-Turkish border being black to the south, the symbol of Daesh, the symbol of the Islamic State. And it was a tough time. It was a hard fight. A lot of people got killed, but we came to an agreement in Ankara on how we would have this agreement going forward. And the history of it needs to reflect that. And I didn't hear it in the last few minutes. Let me make a couple of comments, because I think it's important as we consider Derek Chalet's points this morning. First, Brookings is a nonpartisan institution, so we don't take a political position on anything. We take positions on policies, but we don't take positions on political positions. And so I'm not going to align myself one way or the other with how this administration is unfolding. But I think what is important is for everyone in this room to understand the enormous domestic pressure that the President of the United States is under right now after the last 4 years, where many of the relationships in the Middle East, many of the relationships in the world were policy-free. They were bilateral, personal relationships between a president of the United States who found common ground and common purpose with autocrats and authoritarians in the world. And it weakened our capacity to make the case that we are an institution, a state that champions human rights, champions democracy, champions the rights of individuals, human rights, the rights of women. It weakened our capacity to do that because we were weak at home in those 4 years. So President Biden takes over one of the most difficult jobs of any president, probably since Franklin Delano Roosevelt. A massive pandemic, which caused an enormous economic downturn in the United States. And although our economy is strong again and gaining strength, the pandemic exposed weaknesses in our society and vulnerabilities in our society that then created, through a series of very heavy-handed police actions, a racial reckoning in the United States that comes along once every generation. Those three things alone would have been difficult for any president to deal with, but the fourth was the presidential campaign, the election, the big lie, and large numbers of Americans who still believe that Joe Biden stole the election and is not the legitimate leader of the United States. So when we talk about build back better, that's a pretty tough hill he's got to climb, to build back better. But then when we talk about America is back, that's also complicated by a pretty substantial change, a pretty substantial pivot from the previous administration to this administration, where this administration has sought first and foremost to put human rights and the rights of women and humanitarian action at the center of our foreign policy. It wasn't in the last administration. That's very important for us. Where we have sought to create a bias for multilateralism. That's where we cherish our allies and our partners and our friends, and where we seek to work with them either in ad hoc coalitions, which is the counter-ISIL coalition, and I have to say that Turkey was an enormously valuable player in that coalition throughout the entire issue. And Turkey deserves a lot of credit for the really unselfish way it has handled millions of refugees and migrants. But also the United States fully supports international organizations as well. And this is the commitment of this administration to multilateralism, because we have passed the time where unilateral action is going to get us where we need to go. We also very much support transformational opportunity. And as this administration said, which I think is very important, we will emphasize diplomacy, economic opportunity, human rights over inherent military action. So with that as sort of his background, and I have to also add that the political polarization in the United States has made it very difficult for the State Department. One of the reasons Derek Chalet could talk to us today is because he didn't have to be confirmed by the Congress. There is not an ambassador in Italy right now because many of our ambassadorial positions are being blocked by Republicans in the US Congress. And we can't get our ambassadors selected and put on post where they become the leading edge of American foreign policy. So Joe Biden, in his attempt to build back better and America is back, has got enormous internal domestic issues that people have to understand. America just can't turn off and on its commitment to the region. That Derek is exactly correct, though. The United States remains committed to the region. But in the aftermath of two major regional wars, and I think another question I'll get today is about the military posture, the American presence in the region now is tempered by really three things. The first is the emergence or the continued embrace by the Biden administration of great power competition. Minister Shea was right. The Chinese are deeply engaged in the region. And many of our bilateral partners in the region are benefiting enormously from Chinese foreign direct investment, Chinese information technology in the form of Huawei and the digital backbones that they are embedding in many of the countries in the region, Chinese military support, military arms sales, and basically Chinese loans. And they're deeply engaged in the region. The question is, are those countries better or not with Chinese engagement? As are the Russians. The Russians are more engaged in the region than they were before, but in a very different way than are the Chinese. And I think those of you who've been studying the presence of the Wagner Group in the region, and American forces actually in fighting Daesh in Deir ez-Zor actually went up against Wagner Group elements. The Wagner Group is a destabilizing presence in the region. It is not a stabilizing presence, and it's all over Africa. So great power competition is the first of the three major issues that seems to temper the American presence. The second is reordering the American relationship with many of the countries in the region, which had been defined in many ways by personal relationships of the president or his immediate circle with other elements within the region. And I think the Biden administration is in fact reordering and rebalancing those relations. And I think the third of the three major points, and I'll stop with this one, is the idea that America in diplomatic relations, America in bilateral and multilateral relations, there was a time when we could point to the presence of the United States in those relationships as being transformational. All of us were ending up being better because America was part of it, and was part of it not as the overarching or overpowering hegemon, but because it was a useful partner. And that's where we see ourselves moving back to a position in the Middle East. If diplomacy leads, we're looking for transformational opportunities. The Abraham Accords are a transformational opportunity in the region we could not have imagined a couple of years ago. I think it saved the region from Israeli annexation of Area C in the Jordan River Valley, which I think would have created a furor, which would have much worsened the situation in the region. But the question for America is, are we still committed, as we should be, to a two-state outcome? Very importantly, in the light of the Abraham Accords, are we committed to the Palestinians in the manner in which we should be? And that's not clear to me any longer, that a two-state outcome and the Abraham Accords is in fact mutually compatible. We need to make it compatible. But the conditions on the grounds that have been changed with illegal settlements on the West Bank have made it very difficult for me to envisage a West Bank that is a contiguous Palestinian state over the long term. So those three big buckets. Great power competition is going to dominate. Opportunities to rebalance relationships to where this administration would like to have them, and ultimately seizing transformational opportunities are very important to the U.S. future. And then there are the not necessarily the human or the state-based problems that we all have to face together, but COVID has in fact exposed massive inequality in the region. It has devastated healthcare systems. Large segments of the population in the global south remain unvaccinated. And that has created an issue where this will not only become a pandemic. The likelihood is if we don't work together in a multilateral way, and this region has people who both need our help and can provide help, the pandemic will shift from being a pandemic to endemic. And we'll be dealing with this now for decades. The climate, of course, is coming at us all like a freight train, and there are large segments in the region where multilateral cooperation, and here's where the Chinese can fit into this as well, multilateral cooperation really gives us an opportunity to deal with the management and the mitigation of the effects of climate, where segments of this region will become untenable for human existence in the relatively near future. And then, of course, we have the issues associated with transnational crime, digital and cyber vulnerabilities, and then, of course, the persistent radicalization of populations that produce sort of an unending series of terror groups, terror activities. So the U.S. intent is to do much less in the military context, much more in the diplomatic context, seize transformational opportunities, rebalance relationships, all with the mind of recognizing that the great power relationship that we face in all other areas around the globe will play out there as well. And we want to make sure that as we do that, we do it in a measured way. Thank you.
Now, Lena, you can lead us to Russia.
Well, actually, this discussion already has a gap, which is Russia as one of the main players in all the issues we've been discussing. And so now we turn to Andrei Kortunov. I see many opportunities for Russia in the current landscape. It'll be very interesting to hear from you how Russia's foreign policy towards the MENA region in particular is being anchored in light of all these changes.
Thank you for inviting me, and I would definitely prefer to be with you in Rome rather than in snowy Moscow these days, but still I have a chance to participate in this very interesting and very provocative discussion. I'm of course privileged to take the floor right after General Allen. I have to say that I worked a lot with his predecessor, with Strobe Talbot, when he led the Brookings Institution for many years. And I will try to follow some of the ideas that were expressed by my esteemed co-panelists, though I don't want to advertise the Russian foreign policy. I don't want to make the case for the Russian foreign policy as my co-panelists did for their own countries. Instead, I would try to reflect on how I see the evolution of the Russian approach to the MENA region. And since my time is very limited, I will have to just give you a couple of bulleted points on what I see changing in the Russian approach. First of all, I think that if we trace the Russian posture in the region since 2015, when Russia intervened in Syria, or maybe even since 2011, when Russia reacted to the Arab Spring, we see more humility than before. And we see a change in pattern of engagement. In Syria, it is about control. Russia wants to pull the strings. It wants to be in charge, maybe not exclusively together with its partners, together with Iran and Turkey, but definitely it's about control. If you look at the Russian engagement in many other places of the region, it's about engagement. It's about participation. It's about presence rather than about control. Russia wants to be at the negotiating table, but it doesn't imply that Moscow would like to sit at the place of the chair of this table. I think that we've seen this pattern in Libya, we've seen this pattern in Yemen, and now we see the same approach in Afghanistan. Russia has some limited interests in Afghanistan, limited capacities to have an impact on the situation in Afghanistan, and Russia is ready to go multilateral, to work with partners interested in stabilizing the situation there. Second, there was an important shift from geopolitics to economics. Again, if you take Syria, it has always been mostly about geopolitics, about Russia's geopolitical positions in this important part of the world. It's not a very expensive enterprise for Russia if you compare the Russian intervention in Syria with what the United States spent in Iraq or in Afghanistan. It's maybe $2/3 billion a year, but still, it's not something that you can make money on. You go to Libya and you see that the picture is different. It's about economic interests of large Russian companies, including infrastructure companies, energy corporations, including the defense sector. And definitely the Syrian engagement is something that Russia would like to get some returns on its initial investments. So the shift from geopolitics to economics is a significant shift. It also suggests that Russia understands the limitations of its influence and the limitations of its presence in the MENA region. The third change that I would also identify as an important transition is that traditionally Russia has always emphasized its partnerships with the secular regimes. If you look at Libya, for example, if you look at why Russia supported Marshal Haftar, I think to a large extent that can be explained by Marshal Haftar positioning himself as a fighter against the Muslim Brotherhood, as a person who stood against Islamic fundamentalism, as a person who opted for a secularized future of Libya. However, of course, we can question to what extent indeed Marshal Haftar was a secular leader. Some would question this assumption, but I think that today we see a shift, meaning that Russia is going to recognize political Islam as a power in the region which will be there to stay and which will be something to cope with. If you look at Afghanistan, I think it's a very clear example that Moscow is ready to negotiate with Islamic fundamentalists, provided that some terms of engagement are met by the other side. And I think that will continue. I think that we will see more political Islam in the region. And I think it's a problem not only for Moscow, but for other capitals as well. I would also like to mention another shift which was referred to by General Allen, a shift from this heavy state engagement conducted primarily by the Russian Ministry of Defense to a private public enterprise, which implies outsourcing some of the functions to non-state actors. And we saw it in Syria with the so-called Wagner group, though it's an open question whether such group really exists or it's just a kind of a name for an assorted group of various military companies. But definitely in Syria, the Russian state was less engaged than in Libya. It was less engaged than in Syria in a direct way. And today we see another private initiative in Mali, which of course much less expensive for the Russian state, and it also allows the Russian state to keep a distance from these actors and not to take all the responsibility for what these private actors are doing in this or that country. And finally, I think that an important change was that traditionally Russia stood for status quo in most of the MENA countries. It stood for order against chaos, and it took a rather, I would say, legalistic approach to many conflicts in this area. Today, we see a shift. I think Russia endorses changes, including changes in Afghanistan, for example, provided that those who make change are in a position to control the country and to provide what can be labeled as law and order. There might be problems with some of these regimes that Russia has, there might be discontent about how the human rights problems are tackled, but basically Russia is ready to accept whatever government can provide some kind of order in this or that territory. Finally, and that will be my last point, I think that there are certain opportunities for limited cooperation between Russia and the European Union. Namely, I think we can work together on Afghanistan. I think that there are also opportunities for working together on Syria, especially after the 2020 UN Security Council resolution, UN Security Council resolution on Idlib was extended for another year. I also believe that now opportunities for working together in Libya are slightly better than they were a year ago. Thank you.
Thank you, Andre. Sorry, I was told to interrupt you because apparently Mr. Jai wants to intervene rather urgently. So we're going to move swiftly to Mr. Jai.
Yeah,
Yes, we can.
I talked about and the economic role in the region.
I'm not sure. Economic cooperation, especially bilateral relations between China and the main actors in the Middle East. We don't have much time, so it would be great if you could please limit your
Quindi
intervention
vorrei
to 1
chiedere
minute.
di essere breve nel suo intervento. Grazie.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
This is Beijing speaking.
Yes.
I just talked about China's political and security role in the region, and we do play an important role in the economic sphere as well. We are the largest trading partner to many regional countries. China's trade with countries in the MENA region reached nearly 320 billion, up by 33 year-on-year, and China remains the largest trading partner of MENA countries. China strongly supports countries in the region in combating COVID-19, and China has exported over 450 million doses of Chinese vaccines to regional countries and has been cooperating with many littoral states of the Mediterranean Sea, such as Egypt, Algeria, and Morocco, on the joint production and bottling of vaccines. These efforts give a strong boost to vaccine accessibility and affordability in the fellow developing countries. And we believe that a major factor that leads to the instability in the MENA region is development, because we believe development is the key to all the problems. Therefore, economic development is vital for the region, and China will continue to play a bigger role in promoting economic development in the region. And that's.
Thank you.
Thank you. Now we go back to London. This is the second round of questions, so it will be very short questions, and we hope the similar for the answers. Minister, clearly you are with us. You're listening to us. I'd like to ask you about the cooperation, possible cooperation between EU and UK in the broader Mediterranean region in the coming times, please.
Thank you. Look, this discussion has been absolutely fascinating, and I think one of the big lessons that we all have to take from this, and it came up in a number of the conversations that we have had, is that it's incredibly important that we work together, that we work collaboratively, we work with partners both in our immediate neighbourhood, and of course for the UK. That does mean working closely, as we do, and we will continue to do with our European partners, even though we have left the European Union as an institution. But one of the things that I think is also incredibly important that we all take from this is that we have to work closely with the countries in the region itself. And the UK enjoys, I think, a very good working relationship with almost all of the countries in the region. I can't remember who said it, but one of the points that was raised is that this is a region which holds many challenges. And I think of the areas of conflict in Syria, in Yemen, the recent conflict in Libya, and these require international cooperation to resolve. But of course, it's also a region of opportunity. And I think we've focused perhaps more on the problems than on the opportunities, but the UK very much sees this as an area of opportunity. And a number of the countries that we are working with, we've recently signed a memorandum of understanding with Israel. We are in the opening stages of a negotiation with the GCC about a future trade agreement with them. And also we continue to work closely on the Build Back Better World initiative to ensure that the UK, our European partners and friends and neighbours, as well as the countries in the region who are able to do so, can form, I think, a credible pool of development resource for infrastructure, particularly green infrastructure, to support the economic activities, which hopefully will be the way that we avoid future conflict and problems. So the UK is and will always be very much part of the team. We are a team player, and those relationships that we currently enjoy, we look to enhance through our integrated review over the next few years, so that we can make sure that we don't just talk about a better world, we don't just talk about a greener future, we don't just talk about peace and stability in the region. We are actually able to pull on some of those levers, whether they be financial, diplomatic, joint security. And that's how we envisage ourselves being an active player, both with our European partners and the regional partners, and also our global partners.
Thank you, Minister.
Thank you so much. And as the coach here, I have to say we are in extra time. And so it would be really great if everyone can please limit their interventions to 1 minute max, so that people can go for lunch or breakfast if you're joining us remotely from another time zone. So moving on swiftly back to Andreas von Brandt. Of course, now, with the Taliban being in charge in Afghanistan, there are some implications for Afghanistan's maritime and land borders, especially regarding illicit trade on the Iran side. I'm just wondering what this means for the EU's approach to illicit trade in light of this new development in the region.
So what I can say here is probably a confirmation that what has been said by many previous speakers, that we are in this together. We have been in this together, but given that it was a NATO operation, it may have been seen by others primarily as a Western or a NATO problem. Now there is no more NATO, and at least not in Afghanistan, and now we're all together in this, and I've seen a lot of positive confirmation of that. So I would say, not being there at the moment myself, it's hard for me to go into the specifics, but I would say that the narcotics and the trade in the illicit trade in minerals, the illicit trade even in human trafficking, has been one of our core concerns, and has been dealt with in several projects, and we will as much as possible continue to do so, because it is not that easy at the moment to operate the same way as we have been doing. But even more so, the region counts, and other players count. And again, I think we're all in this together. And the non-recognition consensus, but also the consensus on curbing these illicit trades and trying to contribute to stability is something we all share.
Thank you, General Del Colle. How much Lebanon is important for Italy to keep the regional balance in the Middle East? I mean, some regional conflicts finally appear to winding down. Vienna may pave also the way for more constructive engagement and renew regional international dialogue. The Abraham Accords that was mentioned before also make an important step towards normalization and dialogue. Energy diplomacy is taking place, creating linkage and trade union and trade relationship between former enemies. I think Lebanon has much to gain from the return of dialogue and diplomacy. While there has been a consensus that stability of Lebanon needs to be preserved even amongst the P5 Security Council or amongst regional rivals, the consensus started to erode in recent years. Oil and gas in Mediterranean have certainly raised the stakes between Israel and Lebanon, but there can be an opportunity to mutual profitable engagement. The maritime border is not defined. The U.S. mediation is underway. UNIFIL also been facilitated blue line talks to mark physically the blue line in the contentious area. I strongly believe that the twin tracks of the maritime talks and the blue line talks are mutually reinforcing the progress. No matter how modest in one area can benefit the other. UNIFIL is a peacekeeping force with limited military means and strict rural engagement. Our outward values is that our peacekeepers are the eyes and eyes in the international community. We have 46 countries in UNIFIL, and our capacity of pursuing through engagement with the parties. We have a liaison and coordination mechanism that's working on along the blue line to deconflict and build confidence. Or we have the tripartite is a unique mechanism where the two countries they still technical on war, they stay in the same room, mediated by the chief of UNIFIL. However, we as a UN peacekeepers are not and cannot be a substitute to meaningful political progress. Rather, we operate to create a stable security environment conducive to further political engagement. And in this spirit, I bring the final message. Monday, I briefed the Security Council on that. And UN peacekeeping mission in the region may not be headline news, but our impartiality, the acceptance of the parties and continued commitment of the UN Security Council to our mandates make us a strategic partner for regional peace and security. But what we need now is the return to the diplomacy and the political dialogue.
Thank you. Dr. Kalin, I know you mentioned Libya briefly. You talked quite extensively about Syria. So if I could ask you to just comment on Turkey's positioning in Libya. Of course, elections are about to happen. What's Turkey's... Yeah, hopefully.
We support Libya's territorial integrity and political unity. We signed an agreement with the Libyan government almost 2 years ago with the Fayez Sarraj government to support them politically and in other areas as well. We signed an important maritime agreement with Libya to delimit our maritime zones between Turkey and Libya. And we believe that will help stability in the Eastern Mediterranean. We would like to see the entire, I know others have said this, but I just want to underline the same fact that we would like to see the Eastern Mediterranean, in fact, the entire Mediterranean, a sea of peace, energy cooperation and prosperity for all. And there is a lot that can be done along those lines. In Libya specifically, of course, we support the holding of elections on December 24th. I don't know what will happen. Honestly, I don't think anybody knows for certain at this point, but we support. This is the message we've been giving to the government officials, the prime minister, the president of council, Menfi and Debeba and others, that they should go for the elections. And we support all initiatives to bring the East, West, and the South of the country together politically, so that those divisions, artificial divisions, will come to an end, and all the other legitimate actors will be part of the political process. So we support that. If the officials in Libya end up not having the elections on December 24th for a number of reasons, for the lack of political parties law or for lack of consensus, this and that, they should come up with some kind of a timetable, some kind of a roadmap, and explain to the Libyan people and to the international community why they were not able to hold these elections on time, and also what they are planning to do in the next, say, 6 months, 8 months, whatever the time frame they will decide on together. That they should make this clear and transparent to the people. Otherwise, their legitimacy will be in question. So we support that. Whatever they decide, of course, we will continue to engage them and support them. We have a long history in Libya in terms of economic relations, infrastructure. Turkish companies have done businesses in Libya for many decades, under Gaddafi, after Gaddafi, and we have supported the Libyan February Revolution when it happened, and there was a period of calm and political process, and then a civil war again kicked in. But we are glad to see that has come to an end now. A political process is moving forward, and we will continue to support the Libyans regardless of when they hold the elections or whatever the outcome of the elections will be.
Thank you.
General Allen, what can we expect from the new round of negotiation in Vienna on the Iranian nuclear program? And can we really get to a better deal of the previous one?
Well, I think we all would love to see something emerge that would potentially restore some semblance of the original JCPOA. I'm not optimistic about it, frankly, and I think the Vienna talks are already in trouble. The question becomes, and I think in one of the opening panels this morning, and it's been expressed as well here, my friend from Turkey also mentioned Turkey's important role in this process also. This has got to be a multilateral approach. The US unilaterally pulled out of the deal. I remember very well that both the Secretary of State and the Secretary of Defense were very clear with the President of the United States that Iran was in compliance with the deal, yet we pulled out. That destabilized the deal. On any occasion when the United States is engaged in a agreement where US, China, and Russia are all signatories to it, and we pull out unilaterally, we need to go see a doctor. Getting back in this deal is much harder than it was pulling out of it. Iran has continued its processes on its own. It is not in compliance itself. Just how much enrichment is occurring remains to be determined. It has the delivery systems to place that weapon it can fire in 360 degrees, so it can go in a lot of different directions. It probably has the engineering capacity both to create a device, but also to miniaturize that device into a weapon. And it has the capacity for a full uranium nuclear fuel cycle. We've got to prevent that from happening. And we need a multilateral approach, but the United States has got to be very careful when it goes into this thing that we don't end up compromising a lot of the values that we had hoped to re-inject back into the agreement by our presence. I'm not confident right now that this round of talks will deliver what we want, but we should not stop trying.
Okay, final comments from Andrei Kortunov. If you don't mind me asking a bit of a provocative question, just because why not? It's the last one, and you have been very forthcoming. If Russia wants to control Syria, as you put it, what it seeks there is control, and there are other opportunities in the region for Russia to do that. What is Russia's safest bet, as far as it's concerned, when it comes to the MENA region, regarding something that it sees as a done deal, that it would allow it to consolidate its authority? Is it Syria? Is it Libya? Is it developing relations in the Gulf? What is it exactly? What is Russia's main priority that it thinks this is worth investing in above everything else? Oh, is he muted? You are muted.
Sorry
Yeah.
for that. Sorry
We can
for
hear
that.
you now.
Yeah. First of all, I think that definitely Syria is a strategic investment for Moscow, and Russia would like to keep its military presence there, which is also the Russian presence in Eastern Mediterranean. I think that at the same time, Russia would like to encourage the government in Damascus to do something about efficiency of its economic performance and about a more inclusive political settlement. So Russia is likely to push Bashar Assad, but in a gentle way, as Minister Lavrov once pointed out here in Rome. Second, I think the very important issue for Russia is Afghanistan because of the spillover effect that might take place there, the impact of Afghanistan on Central Asia, and also the drug traffic to Russia, which is a serious challenge. In terms of opportunities, I think that Russia would focus on major MENA countries like Egypt, with which it already has long-term relations and a lot of trade, Iraq, which is also a partner of the Russian Federation for many years and will continue to be a partner, and definitely Russia has very special relations with Israel that cannot be ignored. Finally, let me say that, and I get back to JCPOA, Russia values its relations with Iran, but it is also very concerned that Iran might go nuclear, and that will produce a chain reaction in the region, which will be detrimental to long-term Russia's interests here.
Thank you so much. And thank you everyone for joining us. Thanks to the amazing players on the team. Thank you. Sorry, we went over time, but I think you will all join me in really saying that this was a very rich and forthcoming discussion, and it's not just about what was said, it was also about what was not said. So please join me in thanking our speakers who are here and also virtually.
Thank you so much.
Ladies and gentlemen, the session will resume at 2:30 p.m.